Hey everyone, welcome back. We've got a ton of snow heading for the United States over the next couple of weeks, and I'm talking multiple winter storms that are going to bring heavy snowfall, ice accumulation, and even a big Arctic blast next week that's going to send temperatures plummeting across nearly the entire country. So in today's forecast, we're breaking down everything you need to know about the wild weather ahead. Let's start with what's happening right now. We actually have a winter storm progress with freezing rain and snow moving into the northeast. On top of that, there was an ongoing tornado threat overnight in parts of Kentucky and Tennessee. In fact, we had a rare 5 tornado risk for February in those areas, which is pretty unusual, especially that far north this early in the month. Lots of instability, warm air, and just enough energy in the atmosphere to keep that risk going into this morning and early afternoon. So there's still a chance for an isolated tornado or some damaging winds in parts of Tennessee. But the bigger story is the snow and freezing rain hitting the Northeast over the next several hours. But before we get into the details, hit the subscribe button, like this video, and leave your thoughts in the comments. Thank you for your support. And here's the things. This storm is just the beginning. There are multiple more winter storms lined up behind it. So consider this your appetizer for what's coming. As we head into the weekend and next week, we're looking at least 2 more significant storms in the Northeast, so be ready for that. Matt, let's take a quick look at the rest of the country, the Great Plains. Pretty quiet for now. Same with the West Coast, finally drying out a bit after all those atmospheric river events. There's still some lingering cold air and rain, but the good news is that California, Oregon, and Washington are finally catching a break. All right, now let's talk about these upcoming winter storms and exactly where the heaviest snow is going to fall. So back to today, we've got heavy snow and freezing rain moving into New England right now. That's going to continue into the afternoon and evening before finally moving out overnight. But don't get too comfortable because by Saturday morning, the next storm starts developing. And by the afternoon, it's really going to ramp up across the Midwest and northern Ohio Valley. We're talking moderate to heavy snowfall in Wisconsin, Michigan, southeastern Minnesota, and northeastern Iowa. By Saturday evening, this thing intensifies even more, spreading snow into southern Canada, New York, and northern Pennsylvania before hitting New England early Sunday morning. Here's something else to watch it. A mix of freezing rain and sleet will likely hit northern Indiana, central Ohio, Maryland, and southern Pennsylvania. This storm is expected to be even stronger than the one happening right now for 2 big reasons. Heavier snow and ice, plus a much more intense low pressure system driving it. Sunday morning, we're looking at widespread heavy snowfall across New England, New York, and northern Pennsylvania before it starts winding down Sunday afternoon. If you thought that was it, think again, because early next week, we've got even more snow and ice on the way. Right now, the GFS model is highlighting a major battle zone across the central and southern plains, the Ohio Valley, and the mid-Atlantic. That's where we'll see cold air surging down from Canada, colliding with warm, moist air from the Gulf of Mexico. And that's a recipe for some serious winter weather. This setup could lead to a massive area dealing with snow, freezing rain, and even some severe storms in the deep south. Looking at Tuesday's forecast, it's shaping up to be a messy day. The early indications suggest a widespread band of snowfall across the Central Plains, the Ohio Valley, and the Northeast, with a potential severe weather component in the south. But keep in mind, this is still about 5 days out, so the details could change. Make sure you're subscribed to the channel, and I'll keep you updated as the forecast evolves. Yeah. Now, looking even further ahead, the models are hinting at more winter storms beyond next week, possibly around February 15th or later. We've been talking about this for a while now. An active mid-February pattern with big storms and an Arctic blast. And it's all coming together. To give you a better idea of what to expect, let's check out the European model. By Saturday and Sunday, it's showing a large winter storm over the Midwest, Ohio Valley, and Northeast. And then early next week, we see that elongated stretch of moisture bringing a mix of rain, freezing rain, and snow from the Central Plains into the mid-Atlantic. The European model isn't quite as aggressive as the GFS with snowfall amounts, which is why I'm saying don't get too locked into any one forecast just yet. There's still time for adjustments. But let's talk probabilities. Right now, if you're in the dark red areas across the Midwest, Ohio Valley, and Central Plains, your odds of seeing at least an inch of snow over the next 7-10 days are sitting at 80-90 for the Northeast. The chances of seeing more than a foot of snow in some areas are also extremely high. Again, around 89.9. Some places could even see 2 to 3 feet of snow over the next couple of weeks. As for this weekend's big storm, the early estimates show widespread 6 inches of snow across Minnesota and Wisconsin, with the heaviest totals potentially 5-10 inches falling in a concentrated band. Michigan is looking at around 3-6 inches as well, while Iowa and northern Illinois might see a light coating to a couple of inches, with ice being the bigger concern. And in the Northeast, southern New England, and southeast New York are currently looking at 4-8 inches. But I wouldn't be surprised if we see those numbers climb as we get closer. Now, over the next 2 weeks, the snow is going to add up fast in the Northeast. Models are showing the potential for a foot or more of snowfall in a lot of spots between now and mid-February. But again, this will be spread out across multiple storm systems. It's all going to depend on how the jet stream sets up and how many of these storms actually materialize. Looking at the long-term models, it's becoming more and more clear that the next couple of weeks are going to be extremely active. Most computer models are now in agreement that we're looking at a very snowy pattern for New England, with over a foot of snow likely in many spots. Now, the biggest concern with this ice storm, power outages. If you're in the mid-Atlantic, Northeast, or the eastern part of the Ohio Valley, this is something you need to be prepared for. Most people will probably just see a light glaze of ice, especially if you're up near Detroit, Cleveland, or east of the Appalachians toward Philadelphia. In those areas, it'll likely be a quick hit of snow, a little bit of ice, and then it's done. But don't get me wrong. Even a light glaze can make roads extremely dangerous. Now, where things get more serious is that darker orange area. That's where we could see really hazardous travel conditions and a higher likelihood of power outages. So if you're in that zone, take this seriously. Let's also talk about the Winter Storm Severity Index, because over in the High Sierra, we're about to see some crazy snowfall over the next 3 days. The highest elevations in California are going to get absolutely dumped on with extreme travel impacts. That extends into the Cascades as well. And that's because we've got storm number 2 on deck.
Yep.
This isn't just one storm. We've got multiple rounds coming. Storm number 1 is already causing trouble, but storm number 2 will also impact the eastern U.S., and then there's even a storm number 3 we need to talk about. But let's take it one step at a time. Here's the timeline for this ice storm. Fast forward to early Thursday morning, February 6th, around 2. This is when we'll see heavy icing in the higher elevations of the central Appalachian Mountains, stretching from Pennsylvania down into Maryland, West Virginia, and northern Virginia. We'll also see some light icing in southern Michigan, northern Indiana, and northern Ohio. If you're in Cleveland, you might even hear a couple claps of thunder while it's sleeting or freezing rain. So keep an ear out for that. Meanwhile, in the upper peninsula of Michigan and portions of Ontario, it's going to be all snow. But check this out. By 4 to 6, the real trouble spot for ice is going to be around Hagerstown and Cumberland. This is where I'm most concerned about power outages and extremely dangerous road conditions. Even if you're not right in the core of the storm, places like Scranton and Philadelphia are going to start with a heavy burst of snow, then transition to sleet and freezing rain, making for a nightmare of a morning commute on Thursday. Just like that. By 6 a.m., heavy snow is moving into New York City, and we're still seeing ice in South Central Pennsylvania. It's just going to be an absolute mess. For those of you in the Baltimore and DC area, expect some sleet around this time too. Most places will just see a light glaze of ice, but in areas like State College, Harrisburg, and down toward Cumberland and Hagerstown, we could be looking at 1/2 inch or more of ice buildup. That's the kind of storm that can knock out power. So if you have a generator, make sure it's fueled up. Be ready for at least a couple of days without electricity, just in case. By the time we hit late morning on Thursday, heavy snow will be rolling through New York, but over Connecticut, Rhode Island, and Boston, the heaviest snowfall will hit around noon. By 3 or 4 p.m., it'll be wrapping up. Most areas will see a quick inch or two, but in the higher elevations of the Adirondacks and the White Mountains, totals could be a bit higher. That said, this storm snow impact isn't as impressive. It's really the ice on the southern side that's going to be the main problem. Now, let's talk about the warm side of this storm. Today, we got severe weather potential in Kentucky, Tennessee, and maybe even parts of Ohio. There's a marginal risk of severe storms for February 5th with about a 2 probability of tornadoes. That area includes Bowling Green, Nashville, Jackson, Tennessee, and even up toward Louisville, while tornadoes aren't super likely, it wouldn't surprise me if we saw 1 or 2 quick ones, especially near Bowling Green. Looking at the radar for this evening, by 8 or 9 p.m. Central Time, storms will be rolling into Lexington and Somerset, Kentucky. These storms will be moving fast, possibly bringing some hail and gusty winds. Even in my neck of the woods between Huntington and Pikeville, we're going to get thunderstorms, heavy rain, and plenty of lightning. But here's where it gets interesting. Some of the stronger storms might not even get going until 6 Thursday morning. By then, we could see a pretty solid line of storms over southeastern Kentucky, and this won't wrap up until around noon on the 6th. So what's next? Well, after we get storm number 1 out of the way, I need to direct your attention to California Thursday into Friday. It's going to be dumping snow in the high Sierra. We'll have moisture streaming in from the Pacific, possibly leading to flooding in the Central Valley. This is another classic atmospheric river setup, and it'll last at least through Friday. By then, the storm will track over the Great Basin, hitting the Rockies with heavy snow, and by February 7th, we'll see it push into the Dakotas. Then comes storm number 2. This one looks a lot like the one we're dealing with now, but it's even stronger. By Saturday, February 8th, we could be looking at another ice storm for south central Pennsylvania and Virginia, with heavy snow in southern Ontario and Michigan. Right now, the models suggest this storm has the potential to be more intense than the first one. And then storm number 3. This one is still a week away, but by February 11th and 12th, we could be dealing with a classic nor'easter setup. The current outlook suggests a significant winter storm from North Carolina up into the mid-Atlantic and the Northeast, with heavy snow possible along the I-95 corridor from DC to New York City. If this plays out the way I think it could be one of the biggest storms of the season. But of course, we're still 7 days out, so a lot can change. One last thing. Over the next 10 days, we're going to see above average precipitation in the southeastern U.S. Whether it's rain, snow, or a mix, flooding could be a concern, especially in the Tennessee Valley and Dixie Alley. And the farther north you go, the more likely ice and snow will be a part of that equation. All right, guys, that's all the weather talk I have for you today. Make sure you check back tomorrow. I'll have plenty of juicy updates on these major winter storms. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.